It's time to get started. It is Friday, it's 4 o'clock, and we are here in the Nutmeg Tavern. It's kind of cool in here in the Nutmeg Tavern today. But that's all right, because we're going to be talking about a warm topic. I don't know, is cheese warm? I don't know. Maybe not.
You gotta heat it up.
You want your cheese cold. Warm cheese, not good.
Toasted cheese.
Well, okay, that's good. Anyway, cheese is our topic for today. Why cheese? Well, we're working on a cheese episode, and when I get started on a rabbit trail and start digging, I like to use that material as much as possible. So we're gonna have fun talking about cheese today. We got some cheese pictures. We got to talk about some books that are talking about cheese in the 18th century, and some newspaper advertisements and all sorts of things about cheese. Now, unfortunately, just straight up front, I'm going to tell you that I have not made cheese recently. In fact, I don't know, I've been involved in cheese, but don't ask me immediate 21st century cheese questions about making cheese, because I'll give you a John answer, but I don't know if it'll actually work in real life. So bear that in mind as we speak of cheese. But I am a cheese expert in the fact that I like to eat cheese, which, many people are like that. So why cheese? Why are they making cheese in the 18th century? Why do we make cheese today? Other than the fact that, yes, we like it and it's yummy and salty and has, lots of umami and flavor and all that kind of good stuff to it. Cheese is vitally important to preserving milk. Milk in the 18th century, we didn't have ways of drying milk or freezing it. They don't really freeze milk, but they didn't have good ways to keep milk for long periods of time. So you preserve milk by turning it into cheese and making butter with it. And cheese is kind of really important. It's one of the ways, in a lot of the dairying books of the 18th century speak of cheese as the true profit center of the dairy. So yeah, you get a lot of milk, you've got byproducts of veal, you get byproducts of milk itself, or it's not a byproduct, but one of the products is milk, one of the products is butter, one of the products is cheese. And that cheese component is actually where they make a lot of their money. And if you think about it, it's kind of the most difficult of the three products. So milk, as it is, it comes out of the cow. You do a little bit of whatever you do with it. In the 18th century, today we do lots of processing with it, homogenizing it and pasteurizing it and all this good stuff. But in the 18th century, it's pretty much like put it in a bucket and carry it into town and sell it to people. So you don't do much. You don't have to do much with the milk itself before you sell it. Butter isn't very difficult to make. It isn't a massively difficult product to do. You take the milk and you basically churn it around until it turns out butter. You wash the whey components out of it. You add some salt to it if that's what you're going to do, and ta-da, you have butter. Not incredibly difficult to do. But cheese is that one, 2 or 3 steps further down the road. Okay, we have to have the rennet, we have to turn it into the curds, and then we have to, compress it, and it has to be done in such a way that it doesn't go bad and do nasty things, which apparently they had a lot of issues with cheese in the 18th century. There were many bad cheeses being made, at least so the authors of the books would tell you. So we know that they're making cheese because it's profitable, and it's one of the best ways to deal with this large quantity of milk that comes at certain times of the year and not so much at other times of the year. You want to carry that milk profit into say winter or something like that. So cheese is really important. And what's going on, what's really happening with cheese? We take milk, we turn it into curds, we compress it, we salt it, we age it, and aging is a big part of the cheeses in the 18th century. So many of them, they're like 2 years, come back to this cheese in 2 years. And, that's before then, don't even bother, right? So, there's a lot of aging to it. There's, it's like, even if it's 2 years old, well, each day you should have flipped over your cheese on the shelf. You gotta sometimes, mess with them so that they don't get weird and moldy. You gotta, make sure they grow the rind. It's an interesting process, and a lot like wine. And so, one of those kind of fancy things. Cheese is a very local kind of a product in the 18th century, and it can be today, but so much more so in the 18th century, where each locale kind of had their specialty cheese, and their cheese was kind of different because of the ground, possibly the species of animal, or the variety of cows they had. That's what I wanted to say, and the actual makeup of the ground and the plants that the cows were eating, and then the sort of culinary desires, if that's the word we want to put to it, of the people that are in that area. So, there's a lot to the localness of cheese, and so much more. So now we can import cheese from all over the place and enjoy these strange cheeses. But then, the cheeses of particular locations were known for particular, flavors, or their richness, or the leanness. Sometimes, there's a lot to what's going on, and some of the cheeses are, basically known by their locale. So a Cheshire cheese is from Cheshire, and what were the ones that were in the United States? The Narragansetts, or Rhode Island cheeses. Kind of really, it's like, well, that's I can tell this is Rhode Island cheese, versus a Virginia cheese. I don't.
And one that was specific. There was like New England cheese and New York cheese. So that seems to be the region that specialized in their cheeses.
My candle's going crazy over here. Anyway, so it was very, very, location, local kind of a thing going on. And there seems to be a very particular kind of set of people that are, cheese makers. And, so many times there's, they're known just like dairy maids, or, particularly women doing cheese work. And then in other areas, it's a man's job. And sometimes there's a mix to it. Some places it's a men's job because the cheese they're making is giant. So they're talking in some places about making 100-pound rounds of cheese, or 150-pound hunks of cheese. Takes a husky guys to.
I'm not sure I want to move around.
I wouldn't want to try to pick up a 150-pound thing of cheese. I don't know how you do that. They didn't have 18th century forklifts, but
they needed them.
Yeah, they would have needed them for that cheese factory. Let me tell you, lots of different kinds of cheese going on in our time period. Hard cheeses and soft cheeses. They talk about cream cheeses that are flavored. So they'll put sage in cheese to make a sort of a greenish looking cheese. They were dyeing cheeses to make sure that they had that rich orange color to them. And the authors of the books are talking about that. Maybe with a hint that, you can fake a good cheese by just adding color to it and making people think it's a really good cheese when it isn't. But it seems to be kind of even natural in the 18th century that the cheeses are dyed, and to a great respect, possibly more so than they are today. So today we've got a little bit more of a natural bent to our foods. We're trying to get away from some of those, natural or some unnaturally dyed foods, and say, it can be good and still be a pale yellow color or whatever it is. So we've gotten away from some of that. I think especially with our cheeses, when in the 18th century it was like, no, that cheese is supposed to be orange. And as we'll see in some of the pictures, some of these cheeses, and obviously, the pictures we got, most of them are not, say England. There are some very, I would like to know what some of these cheeses are, because the coloring is just not what you would think of as typical cheeses that we would see today. So some really, really interesting things about the types of cheeses. I'm amazed by the number of cream cheese recipes there are, and slip coat cheeses, which apparently were similar to that. So real soft cheeses, some fresh cheeses, and then different ones that are supposed to be very, very rich cheeses, and then other ones that are hard and meant to last a long time. There's a very specific, I thought, interesting reference to a cheese specifically meant for onboard ship because it probably wasn't a very good cheese, but it was a long-lasting cheese, so it was really good for that sort of thing. So lots of different kinds of cheeses. And we have some references, although they're very hard to judge, about what cheeses actually cost in the time period. And so I don't know how to
We'll get at least one
that.
reference. So.
Yeah, well, I found some other ones too.
Oh, okay, good.
Specifically for the problem in the time period is that even when they say an amount, they're not necessarily telling you what currency it is. So they'll say, it should be six pence a pound. But if you're in the United States, it's like, well, which pence are we talking about here? Are we talking about, sterling pence that's from Great Britain? Are we talking about New York money or Pennsylvania money, new tenor, old tenor? I mean, unless you really know what they're talking about, there's a reason why you don't see a lot of prices posted, because they could be all over the place. And that makes it triply hard to understand how much the price was per, whatever it is. And so, let's jump in and look at some of these pictures. I think that'll give us some kind of talking points, unless you wanted to jump in, Lauren, with anything before I go on to those.
Someone had just mentioned the fact that we had a video about cheese making,
Yes.
and so I just dropped the link into the chat.
Right. So, yeah, we went to Genesee Country Village back in probably 2017, 2018. I think somewhere in there, many years ago.
Yes, it's true.
And the person who did that cheese episode just did a tremendous job. I have spoken to her in the last couple of years, and I believe she's. Last time I knew, she was still at Genesee Country Village, and just wonderful to work with on that episode. And it takes a lot of work, and it was difficult to get all of that into an episode and get it all shot in one day. So it's like we would go and we'd shoot a little bit, and then I'd leave, and she would just keep waiting for the cheese to do its right thing, and I'd come back, and then we'd shoot a little bit more of it because it's not one of those, hey, I'm going to make cheese, I'll be done in 15 minutes, hold on,
Or even an hour, it's so long. So
it's
how
nothing
kind
like
to
that.
be so
Right. So
patiently work
it's like
through
an
the video
all-day thing
process
going
with
on
that.
there.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And then there was someone who had a question about cheeses that were from animals other than cows. So in the picture, some of them will reference goat. Did you run across any other?
Used milk is specifically mentioned for slipcoat cheeses, and in different places they would do horse and all kinds of crazy stuff. But
mostly those three.
Yeah, the vast majority of what's talked about in the dairying books is working with cow, and I think the next, and I don't know about the difference between, say, used milk and goat's milk, kind of the popularity of those two. But those are, I think, probably more of a locale speciality, depending on if you've got a area that is very sheep dense because of the industry that they're doing or the kind of pastures they have to work with. So you might find it more common in those places.
And then somebody else was asking about, was there a lot of concern about sterile cheese-making environments or contamination from other fermented foods in the era?
So there's a couple of there's at least one. Twomley has a book called Dairying Exemplified. That's in 1784. And there are no chapters, there's no index, it's just like one narrative. It's a real pain to read because he doesn't break it up at all. But he references those things kind of sideways. They don't understand the science of the cleanliness and different aspects to that very much. There are like lots of hints to that, but they haven't connected all the points. And so you that he's like, well, there's these people, and they're just able to do it every time, and it works out all the time. And then other people, well, they're kind of slapdash, and you can just feel that the reason is, oh, well, this one is very clean, and they're always, it's a daily thing, and it's a daily cleaning thing, and it's a systematic approach, whereas somebody else is just kind of haphazardly, and every once in a while they make a great cheese and the rest of the time it's garbage. So there is some reference to the cleanliness, but it's not as extreme, and it's like, hey guys, if you're going to do this right, this is the way you're going to do it.
Well, and it might even be because if you make cheese every day, the cheese bugs are floating around in the air, and they make better cheese than people who don't have cheese bugs.
Right, having the consistent
cheese
dairy
bugs.
making would be helpful.
Watch out for them.
Okay, not the cheese mites. So
Yeah.
it was different.
Not cheese mites.
I had picked up, not specifically, but that idea of that dairy maids were expected to be a little. There was a cleanliness expected in the dairy maids that wasn't necessarily expected in other household areas. Okay, I think that you may now drop into the pictures.
now jump into picture land. Love this image. This is, let's see, it is from the 1500s, from the 16th century. This is from that book. There's this town where they kept track of all the tradesmen. They would have like a little biography of them, and they would have pictures of them. For hundreds of years they did this. And so sometimes they're just, kind of headshots. Look, it's sort of like the yearbook of the city. And some of them are much more detailed, like this one. They have cooks in the kitchen. Here they have this cheese man, and he's got his cart with cheeses and his little, cheese stand here. We see, that's a heck of a cart to haul cheese around, but and maybe he's got one of those 150-pound cheeses in the back.
Maybe.
But most of these cheeses are rather small.
Yes.
Those 6 and 8 inches diameter kind of cheeses. He's got some sort of pitcher there with, it could be milk or buttermilk or who knows what, or whey, which is one of those leftover things from making cheese. This image is just spectacular. I'm guessing this is early 19th century.
I'm sorry, I don't have the links to the thing.
Just
so I don't have the dates.
The structure of it and the artwork of it just kind of says, "Hey, I'm late."
That's true. It does. Like it feels like 1803.
But there's so much in this particular image. Now, we were speaking of cleanliness, and we see here that this is not the end-all be-all of cleanliness here, in that we have a dog and a cat running around, and causing their own amount of trouble, and this kind of odd assortment of, things that we would need immediately and things not necessarily. So some of the dairy images are much more stark in their, this room is only for dairy, and just for this particular component. It makes it a lot easier to clean. So, we did a long time ago, we did a video on dairy stuff down at Locust Grove, and they have a particular building that's just set aside for that, whitewashed on the inside, had a particular kind of ventilation and stone so it would stay cool. We don't have some of these things. normally in the dairy, I don't know that you would, well, I guess you do need to have, if you're going to make cheese, you need to heat it up. So you have to have, a fireplace. But how do you keep it very, very clean? And it's not tremendously easy to do in our time period. They have a flagstone floor here. Again, difficult to keep super clean. And we got chickens running around in our dairy. So don't ask me about the quality of their cheese that came out of here and the cleanliness and consistency. But who knows? Maybe it was the best cheese ever. We see an open door here with the cheese storage on the extreme right-hand side. We see lots of vats and molds for cheeses, lots of ways to strain out things hanging on the wall there on the left-hand side for straining out the curds. We even have a little backpack that you would put the cheeses on and you would go into the market so that you could sell those things. So we see a lot of the stuff of cheese making here, as well as an entire family and kids and just wandering around there. This is out of Diderot's Encyclopedia, and it is of a particular, now they didn't have an article on just cheese in general. They had a couple of articles on particular kinds of cheese. I'm not sure which one this was. There are two of them here. But we see we've got a fireplace to work with. We've got lots of, we got a butter churn that's kind of sitting up against the wall. But the person right there in the center is making cheese. He's gently squeezing out the whey from the curds with this particular sort of stool. So there are many of these work stool benches of varying different kinds, made specifically for different jobs in the 18th century and undoubtedly before that. And this one is particularly made for making cheese. And you can see it's like a big pan that has this, that's made for water to kind of, or the whey to run out, and then it has a little pitcher lip so that it pours out a particular way, and he can sit there and do the job. We have another cheese press off onto the side. Look, you can see that it's making in an oval mold, and it's just got a couple of stones on top of the board that's squeezing it, and that's it. And then other sorts of things going on here. Even the things hanging up in the rafters, possibly the cheese is there to kind of smoke or to dry. I'm not sure. I did not read the translated text for this particular one. This is the other Diderot's cheese plate, and this one had more of the tools. So you can see the tools there on the right-hand side. But a little different arrangement. Still, we've got the fire in the corner with the pot to heat up the milk. We don't want to boil it necessarily, but you do really need to have it at a particular temperature. And different objects there to squeeze it out, to strain it out, to do this or that. There are even these little whisk brooms, which I'm not sure about. It could be something like lady's bed straw, which is the vegetable substitute for rennet in the 18th century. And then we have what looks to be a butter churn in the back through those open doorways. Not sure totally about that one. And here are the tools we see on the side. We've got a cheese knife that cuts the curds and some other tools there. And they're specific kind of long, round, tall mold, looks like, for making cheeses. So very different here. We've got a dairymaid who's working on scooping out the curd from the whey and straining it in the cloth here. And you can, now she's using a shell to scoop the curds out. They would use what they called a fleeting dish or a skimming dish. And this, they might just call this very thing here. And you would kind of you're trying to separate and bring the solidified curds out. Sometimes this would be she's not using a metal one. So in the book, it specifically talks about, it's like, well, you could use, say, a brass skimmer, but that might change the flavor or not work well with the cheese. So they're talking about specifically using non-metallic things to do this particular job with. And I thought that was interesting. She's using a shell here. And she's got this interesting wicker basket that she's using as a strainer, which you don't see too often, which I think is interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, it kind of looked like this was a kind of a smaller household one with not as specific of tools, that you just kind of, we just use these things.
Well, and I think that's fun in that we should know that while there are all these crazy tools for making cheeses or a lot of other sorts of things, brewing comes to mind, that they in the time period sometimes did it with just whatever they had at hand, and you don't need $500 worth of strange, funky tools that you have to figure out where you're going to store after you get them.
Right.
You can make do with
or even got. Okay. So for instance, usually when you roll out your pie crust, you use your special pie roller, and that's what you use. But every once in a while, we'll be in a pinch, and we're like, we're just going to use whatever we have around. We're staying at a Airbnb, and they didn't have one. And you're like, we'll use this
I need a jar,
pie kit, right?
Whatever.
And we will. So sometimes you just use what you have.
Yep, very, very much so. So there she is. We don't see what else she's going to use for it. Maybe it's a fresh cheese or something that she's going to be doing, so she doesn't need anything particular. We do have, here's a article in a newspaper that says, it's like directions for making cheese. And, they even tell us, something like, I like that second reference here. The knowledge of the dairy women are often at such pains to spoil their milk by making it into very bad cheese. And then, you're going to get enough information out of this, article to make just excellent cheese. But, it's filling it up. And there are a lot of talking about what happens when the cheese is bad. So if you look down there at about 1/3 of the way through, when the cheese is drying, a putrid fermentation comes on and the cheese swells up so much in the middle, often till it is twice as thick as it was before. That's a bad sign. It was called hoving or heaving in the 18th century text, where your cheese is swelling up, which is generally
not a good sign.
Known to be bad. So don't do that. Here's a recipe for making cream cheese and making it a particular. And there were some places again that were very, very regional kind of a thing. It's like these places are famous for their cream cheese, and apparently Philadelphia cream cheese wasn't being made in Philadelphia. It was someplace like in a whole different state that was. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. Get people upset about Philadelphia cream cheese, but anyway, but cream cheese is a big thing here in our time period. So that making the cheese a different color. Here, this is an advertisement. They're selling different things that's coming in on a schooner, and annatto dye is still used in cheese today, and it was very much so used in cheeses of the 18th century, as well as dyeing other things. It wasn't just used for cheese, and they would also make cheese yellow with carrot coloring and marigolds in the time period. So probably much more of a home thing versus, somebody who's doing lots and lots of cheese. They would just get the annatto, Spanish annatto, or called flag annatto in the time period. Here we have, this was a book had presses in it, and here's like, we'll show you a cheese press. And here again, we see this cheese press. I'm not sure why it's so utterly complicated, why the whole upper bar here, the CDE bar is there, when you could do everything you need to do with the lower bar. But you can see it's just weighted with a stone or a weight. It is not a giant screw press that we're having to press it, 20,000 pounds, we're squeezing the cheese. No, it's a kind of a gentle squeezing operation.
And you kind of got the feeling they didn't really want to pack the cheese too tight.
No.
Like there was a certain texture
the books
they were going.
talk specifically about that it doesn't make it makes it a bad cheese to squeeze it too hard. Don't squeeze your cheese too hard.
Right, and they're like, it's too hard of a cheese.
Right.
They're looking for a happy medium there.
Now this is the kind of picture we wanted to talk about a little bit here. We can see the background, and we'll see this in other ones. Lots of shelves with cheese on them. Stacked up cheeses. They're all very similar, kind of giant hamburger patty looking cheeses back there. Some cheeses they talked about now this is undoubtedly European Dutch probably, but they had different shapes for different cheeses. Apparently Stilton's were always in a square box, something like that. But notice the cheese that she's got her hand on, person on the left, it is very green, very
Yeah,
green.
it is. Someone had mentioned sage cheese, and I looked it up, and it had a lovely kind of marbled green color.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure. I haven't ever seen a cheese personally that was this color.
So if anybody's got an idea about this dark green cheese, I'm interested. I don't know if I would eat it, but I'm interested in knowing. It looks like it's just wow. I mean, there's that chunk that's on the top to the extreme left there on the, sitting on the sill. So there's, sort of like a orange cheese and then a yellow cheese and then this green cheese. So I don't know. If you got an idea, I mean, there might be other parts of the world where super dark green cheese is a thing. I have no idea, but interesting. She's selling a few other things in her shop other than cheese. She's got candles in her basket there, and I'm not sure what's getting weighed out. It's some I don't know what it is, so a little hard to identify. So here's some of the cheese names that are mentioned in the books in the time period. So 2-meal cheese, evening milk cheese, morning milk cheese, Cheshire, Somersetshire cheese, and slipcote, which is sometimes kind of sometimes in the same recipe it'll just say it's a cream cheese, although I don't know that it's always exactly like that. Sage, Marigold, Gloucester, and Double Gloucester, and Narragansett, and Rhode Island. Undoubtedly, in different locales, there would be a lot of different references and different names for cheeses, but these are the particular ones that are mentioned in the texts that we read through. Now, the texts are naturally kind of meant to be a more generic kind of cheese, and somewhere when I get to my papers, I'll get to a couple other names for it. We do have cheeses showing up in still lifes like this one. Now, this one's very interesting looking cheese here. I don't know exactly what's going on with it, and this one's 1771, but I'm not sure exactly where it is. Probably the continent, some European kind of cheese here. This is probably, this is earlier. This is like a 16th century image. And this is like all the animal foods, right? And they're just they put them all over the place for us. And we see a couple of different cheeses, one on the right and one kind of underneath the meat on the left by the pig's feet and a little back further. And then what I'm not sure of is this little white blobby thing at the very left edge right above the fish. That guy I think is cheese related, but I'm not sure. So yeah, you want to hop in on that and tell us in the chat if you recognize that as being something specific. That'd be great. So it's one of those classic. Now notice they put it here in Animal Kingdom. It's like we've got meat, we've got this and that, and cheese is one of those products.
Can you drop
Yes.
out for just a second?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so people were commenting on the green cheese very helpfully. And quite a few people were wondering whether it could just be the rind, right? That a wax or something. But we'll see a little bit later. I'm pretty sure I put it in
Well,
here.
even in those images, I mean, look. If you look at that,
Is it cut?
It's cut.
Oh, we'll see it cut a little more.
Both of those pieces are cut, one in half and one in a quarter. So we're not seeing an outer or a little.
Right, we did think that at first. We're like, could it just be? But no. There's another picture later where we're close up and it's sitting on a table and it's all the way through. And then someone else said that there were a couple different suggestions, but I think the one that was most likely is a pesto cheese that they make in the Netherlands, because this picture is from the Netherlands.
There we go.
I looked it up and I think that's probably what it is. So I feel much better. Thank you.
That sounds very interesting.
I
So
love
that's
pesto.
basil, isn't it?
So it sounds good to me. See, this makes me feel like the cheese actually would be tasty. Despite the color, I'm thinking it would be worth a try.
Because, I mean, it looks like some poison copper cheese. I don't know.
But pesto makes it sound way more appetizing.
Yep, very much.
Okay, yes, there we are. That was all I...
Good. Let me find my way back. Oh, there we go. Yep. Okay, we've got cheese sellers, walking the streets and selling cheese. Goat cheeses, and the person on the right hand is selling milk, cream, cheese, and butter. So she's got, all the dairy products, carrying them around in the basket. I'm not sure, how much, I don't know. The other cheeses aren't very big, but I guess, in that kind of setting, I mean, somebody who's walking around with cheese isn't going to be selling, 20-pound blocks of cheese. So they're going to have these smaller, like a daily portion of cheese, basically. This is, 16th or early 17th century still life, and we've got, very similar kind of cheeses going on here on the side, darker and darker as it goes up to the top. Maybe that top one is another one of those.
It looked like it to me.
Pesto kind of cheeses. We've got a cheese box and little round, probably, cheeses. We think they're cheeses.
I believe so. It listed it that way. Like the Still Life said, Still Life with jug and eggs and cheese.
Oh, so those are eggs, and then the cheese and the thing. Okay, there we go. There we go. And we have here some just street interaction, but we see the person on the extreme right-hand side selling from a giant round of cheese. It's like, okay, I've got my 50-pound block of cheese, and I'm going to slice you off a chunk. And apparently the child there is trying out a piece of cheese. Get away from my cheese.
Oh, they're sampling, just to make sure. It's one of the good cheeses, not one of the bad cheeses.
Yeah, which apparently there were a lot of. Anyway. And you can imagine how, there's cows in the marketplace, people selling in the marketplace, a lot of things going on. These folks are enjoying evening at the tavern or something, and it's the summit of happiness, as it speaks here.
A little bit of cheese, a little bit of wine.
Wine and cheese, and a fire, and a cat, apparently. That's it. That is the summit of happiness. There's some music on the floor, but I don't see any instruments, so maybe they were singing.
No, could be.
But and the summit of happiness apparently has a very large cheese.
Yes, that's the important part.
Not just a little plate of cheese, but bonk. Bring me in that giant slab of cheese. This is a street scene. I think it looks, Amsterdam-y or something like that.
Yes, Amsterdam.
And if we see here on the right-hand side, it's a cheese shop, and you can see through the doorway all the cheeses, and even there's cheese out right there on the street. He's got, it's like, come and buy my cheese. So people surviving on cheese alone as their shop. And now there's still life, some kind of cheese, and notice the big leaf that the cheese is on. I'm not sure what to say about that. There are different cheeses that interact with some kinds of plants. So one of the things you'll see in the recipes, sometimes like soft cheeses, they will put on beds of nettles. Then that'll the chemicals in the nettles will help the cheese kind of set up a little bit. I don't know if that's related here or whether
the artist just thought it was a nice look.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure exactly what's going on with this leaf. Here's another still life. We got some cheese boxes and obviously cheese that's unwrapped here on the right hand side, along with breads and other things. He's just trying to show off. Look, look at he's even noticed what's in the center at the top, which is clear glass
water,
with a reflection and water. Yeah,
I feel like when you're this good of an artist, you should be showing off.
Sure, right. If I could only. In this image, we've got a cheese on the sideboard here on the extreme left-hand side that's being hacked at. It looks, and a very unhappy looking person who's delivering the fish to the people waiting at the table. And this is one of the huge series of Dr. Syntax, and he is he's talking to the dairy maid here, and we can see the cheeses up above. We have a cheese press. We've got a butter churn. We got a cat licking milk up out of one side. So, but we again get a hint of the dairy going on here. This has some cheeses on the table on the right-hand side. Very interesting image of a very primitive-looking home. You can see how the fireplace is basically just an open fire up against the wall here, and even through the open door, there's the cow, which is probably in the like the ante room or another room of this house. So sometimes in the kind of poorer cultures in Great Britain and other places, they would keep their cows in a room in the house, basically. So that's what's going on here. 60 barrels of flour. This is a little sour, and a few broken Cheshire cheeses, as well as a quantity of choice peas to be sold by Joseph Barrel at his store. What an odd little advertisement. Why would you say, I've got some kind of, like third-rate flour, and I got some kind of crappy cheese. Come on in. Give me
Someone's got to buy it.
Right.
Well, and I like that, the bad flour and the broken cheese are bold, but the quantity of choice peas is not.
Could have led with that one.
Maybe he's one of those really kind of down sellers, right? It's like, no, really. You don't want to buy this. This car is probably the engine's going to blow up. I don't know. Not the best salesman in the world. Here we go. Now this is the state of New Hampshire, year of our Lord 1777, during the war, and it's an act for regulating the prices of sundry articles in the state. And down here, it's like you can't sell peas at too much price. Beans can't exceed the price of 6 shillings a bushel. Potatoes are the best sort, shall not be blah, blah, blah. American-made cheese shall not exceed 6 pence per pound. They're trying to regulate the prices because, well, the prices went up, let's just say. I won't go into it beyond that. So they're trying to regulate the prices of goods, and cheese is one of those. Fresh fruit just received. And you can get also good New York cheese by the quantity, as well as raisins and sugar and wine and other sundry dry goods. And then let's see, Charles Lowe has choice Cheshire and New England cheese, so you can get imported cheese or local cheeses. And then here in Portsmouth, they have Cheshire, Gloucester, and Rhode Island cheese, as well as a jar of olive oil, or maybe it's just olives, I don't know. Or no, it's just jar oil, sorry. As well as coffee by the hundredweight. And there is Nathan Barrell again. Now, apparently his cheese is better this time. So he's got lots of things. And down here, he's got cheese to be sold cheaper than any in town. So he's working it again. Charles Norrie is he's a tin man, and he is selling cheese trays and cheese toasters and cheese ovens. So apparently you need an oven just for making your toasted cheese, or I don't know, cheese ovens. I'm not sure. But notice here he's got chocolate pots in the middle. He's got snuff boxes, and Lauren found that here on the last part, he's got gingerbread cutters. So he's got little cutters for doing gingerbread men.
This does come up. You're like, did they have gingerbread men?
Yeah.
So I really like.
They've got gingerbread cutters. They've got something that will cut things out in different shapes. We don't know exactly what shapes they are, but we do have the hint of that. Here we go. A few choice Narragansett cheeses, flask oil, and here's Gloucester cheese here in the Massachusetts Spy of 1772. And there we are, back at the beginning. I'm running late, so I don't want to miss this. Last week I missed it, and that is the names of new and renewing YouTube members and new Patreon. I don't have any new Patreon, but I do have. Let me get this to the right point here in the light. Ace, David Collar of Casper's Coin and Jewelry, Charles Waters, Bill Bailey, Nico West, Terrence Weston, California K, Steve Mahaney, Steph, Loki, Colorado Urban Homestead, and Lawrence Ralphison. I don't know how you say that one. Thank you for being members on here on YouTube and supporting us directly in that way. You can check that out if you wish. Okay,
so people have been talking about the different cheese episodes, and I wondered if you wanted to mention again why we were doing the cheese this episode today.
So yes, we are working on another cheese episode. Because cheese is wonderful and important in the 18th century. So hopefully, well, we'll see. Ryan's doing the bulk of the work on this one, but I was doing my
We know it won't be this Sunday, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yes, this Sunday there will be a marathon. We're doing bread marathon, so make sure to check that out this Sunday.
So while we were, talking about that, and I had to put in the link for that episode earlier, and I put it in the description too. And then I put in like the cheese fritters you did, and somebody had asked about toasted cheese, so I put in the Welsh rabbit. And then Rose was saying, could you make Parmesan cheese so that then you could make Parmesan ice cream? I don't actually know. Parmesan ice cream, a cheese itself sounded like it was perhaps a next level difficulty cheese. But I did drop in the link to the Parmesan.
I think you could use some of those harder, aged cheeses and get some of the same similar things. So Ryan, while he was working on it, he said, hey, we need a cheese mold for this. What are we going to use? And I was like, well, we could use a cake mold like we've used, and a tin cake mold. And he's like, I don't know, do we have one? And so I was in the shop. It's like, do we have any of those cake molds left? Well, we did have one left, but I don't think we're going to be using it for making a cheese. And I don't think that would work out. That was a cake mold that was asked for by some historic site in Great Britain a few years ago. And they wanted a whole set, like small, bigger, bigger. We had them this whole set made, and then we found out that one was so big we couldn't ship it, so we had to keep it. So we have that giant cake mold. Someone asked just a couple of episodes ago about making a great cake, how you made the great cakes. Well, you'd use a mold like that, so you could make a cake that was giant.
In case you wanted a truly great cake. Okay, I got a couple super chats
Yes.
here. This is from Hunter Hertzfeld. I love to see an episode on 18th/19th century toasted cheese, the favorite dish of Captain Aubrey and Dr. Maturin.
And there are multiple kind of toasted cheese recipes. But again, she put the link in for
To the Welsh rabbit.
for the Welsh rabbit, which is pretty much
Toast
classic
cheese
toasted
on
cheese.
toast. Delicious.
Exactly. Some of them were almost like cheese egg thing.
Oh.
Yeah, and some of them are like that one. I was looking at it today, so you just never know what you're gonna run into.
That's true. And then Kodiak sends in, I'm eating cheese right now. The perfect thematically chosen
Yeah, I came
food.
up here and I'm like, where's my cheese? I don't have any cheese to have during the episode.
You needed some Cheshire
Dope.
cheese. Eat well. while we do
Exactly.
this. And then Max Arcool said, there's never a need to supply a reason for a cheese episode.
Too true. Too true.
And then Speed Style Tony, other than Parmesan, what other hard cheeses did they have?
A Cheshire's is a kind of hard cheese, and let me find the one in here. It might take me a little bit because I have a lot of documents here. So here we go. Let me get this by the candle. I'll try not to light it on fire. Skimmed cheese or fleet milk cheese is made from all skimmed milk, the cream having been taken off the whole to make butter or for other purposes. This sort of cheese is much made in the country of Suffolk, or at least goes by the name of Suffolk cheese when at market or in London, where the principal part of it is disposed of, it being much used on shipboard, not being so much affected by the heat of the ship as rich cheeses, or so subject to decay on long voyages, and being bought at a low price. So it is cheap, and it was very, very, it wasn't subject to decay, probably because it wasn't very good. But when you're at sea, it doesn't really matter. You're like, I'll take anything you give me. Another thing I found super interesting today, which was sometimes we talk about in kitchens of the 18th century, the uses of clocks, which we see very few of or none, and what about thermometers? And here we have a reference to, he says, I would recommend the use of a thermometer to show the degree of heat milk bears. So here he's actually suggesting the use of a thermometer in making cheeses. This is from Twomley's book from 1784. So it isn't unheard of in a situation like this. I mean, he's probably kind of like at the forefront, saying, you should probably use, you'll have better regularity if you use a thermometer rather than feels like about blood warm, which is classically what they say.
And we also have a couple different. So we have Ace who joined the Nutmeg Tavern members,
super.
and Rob Vig 60 who joined. So
Thank you very so much. We do have here he talks about the principal faults. So we're used to going to the store and getting just amazing cheeses, right? Anytime cheese, it's always good. It's probably good forever. The principal faults that cause these difficulties to dairy women are Hove cheese, spongy cheese, cheese that's full of eyes, whey springs, so like whey will start to gush out of the cheese, like it'll, kind of, it didn't run out of the cheese when it should have. Loose cheese, cheese made of unsettled curd, rank or strong cheese. Sometimes you can use too much rennet and that will cause a rank or a strong cheese. Flying out or bulging at the edges, dry cracks, husky coated cheeses, blistering in the coat, blue-paired or decayed cheese, sweet or funky cheese. I think it's one of the few references to funky I've found in the 18th century. You don't want that? That's funky cheese.
Okay, I have a couple questions.
Yes.
Okay, so somebody was wondering what they did with the whey. So did you run across any
You know,
references to
they do have different things. So they talk about just drinking whey, you know, people eating curds and whey, that happening. But probably the vast majority of it gets fed to animals. Even though there's a lot of good stuff in whey, there's a lot of things that are left in whey that, you know, you actually don't want to discard. They might also use it as a fertilizer, so put it on in a garden or whatnot. But I imagine the multitude of it is probably fed to animals.
So a couple of encouraging comments in here. One of them from earlier was saying that they had used the videos when they were doing teaching in their classroom, because of course, and that it had been a really good way for the kids to interact with that.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that you know, what we do is useful in that way. It's, you know, it's in smaller bites, and hopefully I'm not boring or putting people to sleep.
Good way for people to connect. And, you know, food, always a good way.
Yeah, exactly.
And then this one's from the Yankee Minstrel. Hello there, John. I got into historical cookery a few years back after watching one of your videos, and it is the most fun I've ever had in the kitchen. Thank you for all you do. God bless.
Thank you very much.
And before you... Okay, so somebody had talked a little bit about the fact that, so in the dairy, they talked about having the white walls, and if there was a reason for that. And, you know, for back when we were talking about the cleanliness, I don't know that they knew that the whitewashing was purifying, but it is a helpful thing to do.
Right, so what you're doing with whitewash is you're using a lime wash on those walls, and that is very antiseptic. And the nice part is that you can just recoat the wall again with the same material. It just gets thicker and does its thing. It's making this sort of basically a limestone coating on the wall. And yeah, again, whether or not there's so many things that are happening in the 18th century and earlier than that, where you know that they don't have a scientific concept of that, but that doesn't mean they didn't know that it was a good thing. I mean, just through basic trial and error, or inspiration. I have no idea where it comes from, but you know, it doesn't mean that those things aren't true. So, you know, we can look at them as wives' tales, just because they didn't necessarily have some great, you know, scientific grounding to it, but that doesn't mean they didn't have experiential grounding to it.
I'm not sure that isn't more impressive.
Right.
That from trial and error, you're like, this works best. We're gonna remember to do it this way.
Because some things in science should work X, Y, Z and don't, and we don't do it.
Right.
Right. So it's like, I don't know. It's just always what happens.
So somebody was wondering if we knew the reason behind the conical bowls that they were using, like in the picture she's scooping with the shell and she's using one of those conical.
You know, we saw a lot of those in the dairy pictures, sort of like cloth funnels. So I think it just naturally distributes the material so that it can drain the whey out the best way. I can't explain it beyond that. And possibly also so you can turn it inside out, you know, and just, you know, so after the stuff is all drained out of it, you turn it inside out, and it's easier to get the material out. Whether if it was just a straight up and down thing, you know, it wouldn't drain as well. By experience, probably.
Right. Somebody was wondering how salty the cheeses were in the 18th century.
They spoke in the books specifically that you would add a decent quantity of salt there, and if you didn't have enough salt, you would get one of those cheeses that would do the thing like bulging and funky, bad things. So yeah, I think they're pretty salty.
And somebody was a very important question. Is it true that mice don't prefer cheese and that there are other things that they like better?
I'm not a mouse. I do not know.
They seem to really like peanut butter.
Well, yes. Yeah, I don't think cheese is what you want to use to catch mice. I have no idea why that became a thing. No clue.
Maybe because it is something they do like, but that it preserves, so you can leave it in a trap.
Yeah.
Unlike some things.
Maybe.
That,
Or maybe it was an art thing, and it's like, look, this orange block is going to look cool here rather than whatever. Yeah, a mung bean or a thing of wheat or whatever.
And somebody else had a question. They were wondering, did you run across, what's the longest shelf life that you'd heard run across mentioned for a cheese?
Yeah, I mean, when they were talking about 2 years, they were talking about it being minimal for that. I have no idea what kind of maximal, how long you can keep a cheese and still have it, be a good thing. That's a excellent question. I don't have a good answer for it. I say cheese is so yummy. Why would you let it get older than 2 years?
So just let it get old enough, and then now's time. Okay.
So we did it. We got through an hour of just incredible cheese information. It's a huge topic, and I undoubtedly could probably do 100 cheese episodes. We could make all kinds of crazy cheeses. We won't do that. We won't turn this into a cheese channel. But it is fun, but it's going to be technically challenging on that one, and I'm not sure exactly what we're gonna do, how that's gonna work out. But it'll be fun, and hopefully I get to eat the cheese.
Okay, we all set?
Super thank you to all you direct supporters, Patreon, people who purchase merch, and we do have some really cool mugs. Mm-hmm. There is a new one on the website, right?
I did. I put Northern Lights on there.
Northern Lights is back up on the website, which has got the boar logo on this just gorgeous cobalt blue looking mug. That's on the website. So thank you for the merch purchases and whatnot. And we do have another merch thing we're working on, which is going to be really cool. We've got it halfway there. But we're working on the packaging. So there's that. And the people who are in Super Chat, again, thank you. And you constant, wonderful supporters of the channel, just, chatting and giving us all these great suggestions and whatnot. I can't thank you enough for how you help us make the channel do what it does. And, not only does it help us, but people around the world watch the channel, enjoy it, and learn from it. I am always amazed. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for watching.